Number 1. I had never heard of the black-eyed children until I encountered them. Still not knowing who or what the hell they were, I did what any modern 25-year-old male would do. I googled them. And boy, was I shocked that I wasn't the only one. Had I not seen them for myself, I would have just thought it to be another modern urban legend gone viral. Besides my girlfriend, I've only told my brother, who is into everything creepy and horror, for I knew he would be the only one to not judge me or try to commit me to a mental hospital. He is the one who said I should post it here. Keep in mind, I am not a writer. I don't want upvotes or to try and impress anybody with a good read. I am simply trying to warn people that some things out in this world are beyond our comprehension, and if you hear a knock at the door, make sure you check before opening it. I wish I had. Here's my story. My girlfriend and I live in a very small gated community in southern West Virginia called Glade Springs. The community has about 150 houses, a country club, and a steakhouse called Bunkers. Now, anyone can come through the gate during the business hours of Bunkers, but after they close, the front security gate stops all traffic and makes sure you are a resident, and if you are a visitor, they call the house that you are going to verify that you are actually expecting them. Sometimes it's a hassle, but hey, don't have to worry about a robbery. So imagine my surprise when my doorbell chimed at 3 a.m. I am jarred awake and wasn't sure if it wasn't just a dream, considering I had just went to bed shortly before and was probably just going into REM sleep. I rolled over and looked at the clock, noticing the time, and when my doorbell chimed again, I felt a cold chill run through my body. Not reading too much into it, it could be one of my neighbors had an emergency, right? I made my way to the door. Now I see how foolish I really was, and opened it. Luckily, the rough iron storm door was still locked, because who or what stood before me was not a resident of the community. 2 young boys stood at my doorstep, one looking about 17 years old and the other looking about 10, wearing dark hooded sweatshirts and jeans. The young one had shaggy dirty blonde hair and would only look down at the stone steps, and the older one had his hood pulled and his head tipped to where I could only see from half his nose down. My voice caught in my throat, and before I could even ask what they wanted, the older one spoke. His voice sounded forced and dry. There was no emotion of what he said. I am sorry to bother you and your girlfriend, but we need to come in and use your phone. We've been in an accident. I felt the familiar chill return to my whole body. How did he know my girlfriend was here? I tripped over my words. Something about these kids wasn't right, wasn't normal, wasn't human. I can bring you my cell phone and you can call. I don't get service inside here, so you have to stand on the sidewalk to call, I finally said nervously. Of course I was lying. I did not want these kids in my house. Well, my brother really needs to use your bathroom, Kane. We have to come in, the older one said. And that's when I went into complete panic. He knew my name. I'm sorry, are you from here? How did you know my name? The words practically shook out my mouth. That's when he became slightly hostile and demanded to be let inside. And I told them I was sorry, but I couldn't help them. And just as I was about to close the main door is when it happened. The both of them snapped their heads upwards and looked me straight in the eyes. Black, no iris, no pupil, no retina, just pure deep black. I was paralyzed with fear. For a second I thought those kids were just playing a really cruel joke and had snuck in the community somehow and had bought some of those freaky supernatural demons Clara contacts. That was until I heard ringing. It was like a ringing sound that you hear when you have a hearing test done, and then the flashback started. I was suddenly a toddler again at my grandparents' house, sitting under the chestnut tree with my mother picking up the nuts and putting them in a large metal soup kettle. It was a crisp fall day. It's one of my earliest and dearest memories. I was about 3 and even have a picture, and one I hold very near to my heart. But then they were there, behind my mother. We looked at their eyes and were still black as night, and suddenly they smiled. That's when everything went black. The next thing I knew, I was shaking awake, lying in the mud floor, my girlfriend standing over me with a worried look. "What the hell, Kane?" she asked. I had no idea how to answer her. My head had taken a good whack against the slate floor, and a bit of dried blood was stuck in my hair. But other than that, I was fine physically. I slowly remembered everything that had happened and looked at the door. Daylight. I've never been so happy to see morning in all my life. I told my girlfriend everything that had happened, and I honestly think she thought I had brain damage from hitting the floor, but she insisted she believed me. And then we Googled it, and I believe that's when she really started to believe me. I don't know who or what they are, or where they come from, but they are not of this world. I know that for a fact. For some reason, I had a lingering thought. I'm still not sure if they put that thought in my head or not. That they wanted me to know that even my memories aren't safe. They are very strong and seem to be growing in numbers. For some reason, they seem to not be able to hurt you physically unless you invite them in, which I don't know, since either no one has ever let them, or the ones that have aren't around to tell their story anymore. But they can get in your mind. Since that night, I feel like I'm being watched. I see them out of the corner of my eye occasionally. I look at my girlfriend while we're at the movies or dinner, and her eyes will be solid black for a split second, and worst of all, they took one of my most precious memories and turned it into something sinister. Something that's now a constant reminder of the black-eyed children. Number 2. It was a cold October evening, not too far off from Halloween. I remember sitting in my room, playing the original Suikoden. The evening was slowly creeping by, so I decided to go to the corner store. It was only 3 blocks. Shouldn't be much trouble, right? During my walk, I see the normal, the occasional person putting up Halloween decorations, and kids playing in their yards. But this story is about something far more sinister. I remember seeing two teens, about age 14, knocking on a door, asking to use the phone, which of course I thought was weird because most teens these days have phones. As I kept walking, they stopped and stared at me for a short moment. I felt the blood in my veins chill. I felt so creeped out. I hurried to the next block. The next block seemed fine until I looked behind me and saw the two teens were following me. I took off sprinting to the store at this point. I saw the sign for the store and relief washed over me. I opened the door and I told the cashier about what happened on the way here. He looked at me slightly creeped out and told me a story about this happening to him in his hometown and how they found him the day he left and asked for his help in an emotionless voice, and he told me to never agree to help. He told me another story, but at that point I was no longer paying attention because they were standing at the door asking to be let in. The cashier freaked out and locked the door. The teens never seemed to wave or leave. They wouldn't step away from the door. It had been an hour. The cashier and I were ready to fight our way out, but instead he took me out the back. Then one team came around the back just as the door shut behind us. "Can you help me?" is all he could say. He was closing in on us, and his eyes, they were black as a starless night. They were peering right into my soul. I couldn't help but gaze into his eyes. The terror, I can't remember too much of what happened next, but I do recall the sound of struggle. When I calmed down, the cashier was struggling with both teens. He was calling out to me for help. I ran towards them, grabbed him by his collar, and pulled him between the two, and knocking them over in the process. I didn't look back until I was near my house. The cashier was gone, but the teens were still following behind. I ran into my house, closed all the blinds, and turned the music up. I got lucky that day, but I'm not sure how long I can keep out of their grasp. I tried to find and thank the cashier for saving my life that day, but he didn't show up to work after that. I asked his boss, and he told me he called over the phone and quit. He said he was moving. To this very day, I sometimes feel the fear of those eyes watching me as I drive to work. I sometimes will look out of my window, and I swear I see them watching my house from a couple blocks away, waiting for their next chance. Number 3. It almost felt like a dream. I woke up to my dog, Lucy, barking. She was upright on the bed where my husband and I were sleeping with our 22-month-old daughter, staring at our door like an unknown stranger was out there, rummaging around. I thought she was just freaking out over a house noise. We'd only had her for 3 months, and she was still a puppy. It could have been anything: a roommate, a creak from the house settling, the awnings moving outside in the breeze. I wasn't too concerned initially. I decided the best would be to open the door and show her nothing was there. It sounds a bit silly, but it's what we do with our daughter when she gets scared, and I figured it should work with the puppy too. I opened the door and she raced to the front door. She stood there, snarling at the door. It was an angry, violent growl, one I had never heard her make before. I looked groggily at her and opened the baby gate blocking the doorway, planning to open the door and show her everything was okay. The second my hand reached for the deadbolt, Lucy went wild. She started barking and jumped toward me, and when I touched the metal, she suddenly changed her temper. She whimpered, almost like she was afraid and backing down. As her mannerism changed, so did mine. I wasn't calm anymore. My heart was racing and sinking at the same time. I had been flooded with a mixture of fear and dread. I looked through the peephole, and I can't explain what I looked, but I did. Outside were two kids. One was just a smidgen shorter than me and didn't look much younger. I'm 21 and she looked to be 16 or 17. She was slender and pale. Her hair was a light shade of honey blonde and she wore it long, about mid-back, with long thin blunt bangs in the front that covered most of her eyes. She wore jeans, a light wash that's popular right now, and a thin-looking olive-colored pullover style hoodie. She held the hand of a small girl who looked to be around 3 or 4, in the same style jeans and a button-down ivory cardigan. The smaller one looked at the floor shyly, but had the same shade of hair tied back in a ponytail. She held a stuffed toy under her free arm, and it was identical to one my daughter has, as was their style of dress. Had it not been for the feeling of overwhelming dread and fear, I probably would have asked these children in and given them some tea or hot chocolate to get them out of the bitter cold. Something about them seemed off. At this point, I hadn't made any noise. I hadn't shushed the dog or grumbled. Nothing. I hadn't turned on any lights. These kids had no indicators I was at the door. The older one spoke. She had a voice that was mature, confident, strong, and accentless. She held her head tilted downward, and I couldn't see her eyes. She said, "We have to use your phone." I stood frozen in fear. How did she know I was there? She raised her head to face me directly, and that was when I saw her eyes. There was a reason I couldn't see them through their bangs before. They were black, or midnight blue, or a dark, dark purple. She said, "Our mother is worried." As someone who has always been interested in creepy stories, I knew what she was the second she looked at me through the door. I've never been one to believe in these things as an atheist and skeptic when it comes to the paranormal. I had read off many ghost stories from friends and family members eager to tell their tale. I didn't believe it. Still, I couldn't rationalize my way out of this. I was standing with nothing but a thin wooden door between me and a black-eyed kid. There was no questioning what was right in front of me. I did not answer her. Slowly and silently, I backed away from the door. Lucy still cowering at my ankles. She kept talking. "Just let us in to use your phone." I took another step back, and with that step, the tone changed. At first, she seemed polite. When I took that second step back, she became commanding, almost hostile. We're not going to hurt you. If we wanted to do that, we would have broken in. I'll ask again. May we come in and use your phone?" Lucy snarled at the door, and I inched backward, though something inside me seemed to be slowly pulling me back toward the door. It wasn't a physical pulling so much as a subconscious need to go back and let them in. I got to my room, covered up the window, locked the door, and sat there in the dim light of the nightlight. I heard her call me back to the door once more, and then quiet. I didn't go back to sleep that night, and I haven't slept right since. I know from reading about them that black-eyed children can't just come in without permission. I know they haven't hurt anyone, but I still fear I'll be the exception. When I told my husband, he said it was just a dream. He keeps telling me to forget it, but this lingering feeling of sadness, this dread when the house is silent at night, this fear of a knock at the door, this tells me otherwise. Hey there, and thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up, and if you like my videos and want to see more, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you all in my next video.